So welcome back to my channel and continuing my hunt through the castles from this book, Castles of the Marches. This is a book I've talked about before. It covers about 120, 130 castles along the Welsh-English border that were primarily started, or at least the sites were started by the Norman lords after William I's conquest of England in 1066. So here goes. Here's another castle coming right up. So the next castle I'm going to take a look at is one of the most incredible ones I think I've ever been to, particularly because I didn't really know it existed. So forgive me for those of you who come from that part of England. But so this is the castle of Beeston, Beeston Castle. It's formerly a royal castle in Cheshire in England. It's sort of on the edge of multiple counties of England, not far from Cheshire itself, not that far from Liverpool, the Welsh border area, sort of really sandwiched in there. Now, what's extraordinary and what took me by surprise when I saw the pictures of this castle was how similar it looks like some of the castles you see from the Holy Lands. These amazing edifices sitting on top of rocky outcrops out in the middle of nowhere often. And that's exactly what Beeston's like. So it's perched on a sandstone crag about 350 feet, 107 metres above the Cheshire Plain. And it's extraordinary because it literally is a promontory that sort of sticks out, and this castle is perched on top. So the site has been occupied because of its very, very interesting location above effectively what's a floodplain. It's been occupied for millennium, really. So there's evidence of Iron Age and Bronze Age fortifications and settlement on the hill where Beeston Castle is located. Indeed, the original castle was built on top of what was a substantial Iron Age hill fort, and much of the defences for the modern castle, but the medieval castle follow the lines of the Iron Age hill fort. When we were there, there was a couple of historians who were showing off a roundhouse that they had built, or the history that the history group had built on the site, because there's a lot of evidence of ironworking and metalworking generally on this hill for some considerable length of time. So Beeston Castle itself was originally built in around 1220, or in the 1220 period, by Ranulph, 6th Earl of Cheshire. He was one of Britain's or England's greatest medieval barons. And the reason why it looks as it does is because he did take part in a crusade to the Holy Lands and took his inspiration very clearly for Beeston Castle from that. However, not sure it was necessarily the right place, because there's a lot of evidence that the castle was never fully completed and was never actually properly occupied. So it probably was quite an austere and daunting location, plunked up there on the heights of such a high plain, overlooking. You can see 8 different counties from the top of Beeston, and I wouldn't disagree. It is a phenomenal view, and on a nice day you can see for miles. So originally built in the 1220s, it was taken over into royal ownership by Henry III in around 1237. And it was kept in good repair until around about the 16th century. Although, again, no real evidence that it was ever properly completed. In fact, the guidebook there from English Heritage, who maintained the site, suggests that they found evidence of only one fireplace in the entire buildings up there. Now, given the fact, we were there on a very wintry January day, and the wind was whistling, and it wasn't snowing or anything. It was just very, very cold. The thought of being up there on your own with no fire and no kind of means of keeping yourself warm is quite worrying, and therefore probably very clearly shows that it wasn't properly used or occupied for any significant time or by any significant number of men. When Henry took over the castle in 1237, he did it because the previous Earl of Cheshire, John, had died without any male heir. And so Henry took over the whole earldom. And during that time, he enlarged Beeston. Because it was the time of the wars with Wales. He used it as a prison for his Welsh captives. However, no attempt was made to equip the castle as a permanent residence with halls and chambers. Garrisons were probably housed in wooden structures within the Outer Bailey. The Outer Bailey is a huge area. It extends basically from the base of the hill pretty much up to the inner area where the main walls for the castle were itself. And the castle can only really be approached from one direction, because on three sides there's sheer cliffs downwards. So this very steep inner bailey leads up to the outer bailey leads up to the inner bailey, and there's a well inside the outer bailey, which is considerably quite deep now, and there's another one right at the very top in the inner bailey, which has given rise to a number of stories and fates about the fables about the castle itself. In fact, it's suggested that treasure, Richard II's treasure, was buried at some time within the castle grounds, and rumour has it was within the inner bailey well. But despite several attempts to excavate it, there's been no real evidence that may be true. Although there are what appears to be sort of hidden chambers down there, so who knows? It may once upon a time have held the treasure of Richard II. So in 1254, King Henry gave Beeston, together with its other Cheshire lands, to his son, Prince Edward, and he was also given the title of the Earl of Cheshire at the same time. During the Montfordian rebellion in 1254, Henry gave Beeston, together with the other Cheshire lands, to his son, Prince Edward, who he also gave the title of Earl of Cheshire. And it was during the times of the Montfordian rebellion, and in 1265 the castle was retaken from Montford's side by James de Audley. However, much of there wasn't really evidence any proper fighting as such around the castle, because, as I say, the castle was never fully and properly occupied, and therefore didn't really have any substantial garrisons. In the middle of the 14th century, there's reference to men of Cheshire who were made constable of the royal castle. The constable would probably have lived in or near the gatehouse right at the top, which, as I say, is the one building that appears to have evidence of a fireplace that still remains on the site. It was described in 1593 in one history, but as a good, strong gatehouse and strong walls with other buildings, which, when they were flourished, were a convenient habitat for any great personage. And in fact, Beeston was kept in good repair and improved during Edward's reign throughout the 14th century. However, by the 16th century, it was considered to be of no further use to the English crown, and in 1602 was sold to Hugh Beeston of Beeston Hall. During the English Civil War, many neglected castles were pressed into service, and Beeston was seized on the 20th of February 1643 by parliamentarian forces commanded by Sir William Brereton. The walls were repaired and the moat was cleaned out, and during 1643, part of the Royal Army of Ireland landed at Cheshire, which is just up the road from Beeston, and on the 13th of December 1643, Captain Thomas Sandford and 8 soldiers from that army crept into Beeston at night, possibly aided by treachery, and surprised the castle governor, Captain Thomas Steele, who was so shaken by the events that he surrendered on the promise that he would be allowed to march out of the castle with honours. Steele, however, was tried and shot for his failure to hold the castle. So the castle was then occupied by Royalists, and Royalists survived a siege by parliamentarian forces from November 1644 until November 1645 for a whole year, when their lack of food finally made them surrender. As I say, there was plenty of water, so that wasn't an issue. The castle was finally partially demolished in 1646 to prevent its further use as a stronghold. The castle seems to have been largely vacated and left as ruins for the next couple of centuries, although there's quite a lot of evidence of quarrying on the site. The sandstone was obviously very useful and had always been a site of considerable interest for the stone it could provide to peoples of the area. However, in 1840, the castle was purchased by John Tolmarsh, first Baron Tolmarsh, at the time the largest landowner of Cheshire, as part of a larger estate. And in the mid-19th century, the castle was the site of an annual 2-day fete, raising money for local widows and orphans, attracting more than 3,000 visitors a day. Today, the castle is owned by English Heritage, and although it's ruins, enough of the walls and towers are still in place to provide a clear picture of how it would have looked like in its prime, and it is a spectacular site. It's open to visitors, has a very small museum in the visitor centre. You do have to pay to get in, but as I say, I think it's well worth a visit, and if you're a member of English Heritage, it's obviously free because it's part of their catalogue. The views from the top are absolutely spectacular, and if nothing else, are well worth the visit, although you make sure you got your walking boots on, especially if it's a bit muddy, because it's it's very steep to get up there. And once you get into the proper castle itself, into the inner ward, the views are spectacular. So there you go. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll be back with another castle very, very shortly.